Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about those relationships that feel faded, but they are not. I'm here to burst some bubbles. We've all had those encounters that feel larger than life. We feel like a real draw to the person, a real attraction. We feel ease with them. Talking can be so easy. If you're a little more woo-woo, it might feel like a soulmate. It might feel like destiny. It might feel like fate. I know for myself, I've even had these encounters where I experience synchronicities. The timing seems right. There's a lot going on that seems right, but it turns sideways. And yeah, I'm here to explain what that's like, because those are the kind of things that can be hard to dissolve energetically out of your, mind, and they can feel like they were something that was meant to be, and you just you can't understand why. You can't why am I thinking about this person so much if it's somebody that I'm not meant to be with? And I'm starting to really learn that through this lady's channel, Crappy Childhood Fairy. I'm really seeing how CPS, complex CPSD, can fuel that sort of attachment, some of that magical thinking. She has a really good video on limerence. Really check out her channel. The purpose of this video is just to be a survey. It's not to dive deep, and it's just to share some of the research that I found and check out the people that I'm bringing up, because they're going to go into it in more depth. So I'm going to talk about it from a soul level, from a psychological level, from a body level. Some of this is interchangeable. Whatever terminology, whatever paradigm kind of works for you. So when you meet these people that it's just like, wow, from a soul level, that's kind of your soul screaming out, saying, you got something to pay attention to. You got some wounds that need to be healed. I know we want this to be the one, or an amazing relationship or whatever, but it does tend to be the soul needing to be healed. So different people say sort of the same thing in different language about this. So Teal Swan talks about how this deep attraction is kind of like a call for a personal expansion, something in that person that you want, and you want to get that via the person. They embody something you've disowned, something you've rejected, and you're being called to reintegrate that. Braden too has a wonderful video. That's Gregg with 2 G's. He has this wonderful video called the 7 Essene Mirrors, where he is rocking like a shoulder length mullet. You should watch it just for that amazingness. The premise of it is that we meet people and they're mirrors. I think, psychology covers that. He is going through these in phenomenal detail, and he is a wonderful speaker, and he's so easy to understand. So I think it's the 3rd Essene mirror. So he's sort of saying the same thing as Teal Swan, that when you meet somebody that you have this feeling with, and he has 2 examples. One example is a colleague that falls in love with, he's on a date and he falls in love with the waitress. These sort of interactions can seem really faded. And then he has a personal example of his own where he met a woman at a conference and they just couldn't stop talking to each other. One of those situations where a coffee turns into lunch, turns into dinner, turns into whatever. This is all in my mind because I had that experience with the psychotherapist where it was that kind of date, 11 a.m. coffee turned into tea, turned into lunch, turned into an afternoon drink, turned into dinner, whatever, it was 7 hours, and I couldn't stop. I wanted to hear everything he had to say and really connect and talk and talk and talk. So Braden is also saying sort of what Teal Swan is saying, that in these kind of interactions, you need to look at pieces of yourself that have been lost. So pieces get lost either inadvertently or you're sort of giving them away. So when you find those sort of people, you have to look at what you've lost, what you've given away, or what's been taken from you. And he says that when he had that interaction with the woman, he realized sort of innocence was something she had, and that's something that he had lost. I would say for myself, with the psychotherapist, an intellectual mind and an intellectual network is something that he had and I have lost. Just to simplify it here, things can get much more complicated. We have these mirrors to figure out the parts we've lost, the parts we've given away, the parts we've rejected, the parts we've disowned, all of those things that we need to reintegrate to feel whole and complete. And person is mirroring back what we need to heal. On the more painful side, that person can also be mirroring back wounds. I'll get into that in the psychology. The spirit soul psychology, I find it so similar, just almost different language. So as usual, I'm going to be bumbling along a little bit. I think I'm getting better though. But there is that charge with that person, right? Like there's like almost this crackling electrical magnetic charge. Oh yeah, like when I get that magnetic charge, I was watching a movie the other night and the guy had bought a $200 magnet, and that's what that charge feels like, is a $200 magnet that just sticks and you can't pull it off. That's when we know we got to roll up our sleeves and we got some work to do. You do notice like other people have different charges. Like when I talk to my friends and they talk about the things that drew them to somebody, it's things that like I couldn't care less about. So you sort of, where the charge is where the work needs to be done. And there's healthy attraction, but this is like compulsive magnetic attraction. Then there's also another, like, if I'm going to get really into the woo-woo, there's this writer, I read her book, Tracee Dunblazier, that's Tracee with 2 E's. She describes these interactions as like, there is a deeper meeting of the souls here. This is a meeting that is bringing up like a karmic charge that needs to be figured out and discharged. This could be bringing up past life stuff. This could be, according to her, this could be somebody you met in a past life and you still have some karma to work through with usually the kind of like opposite wound. So say you have abandonment issues, you're gonna meet an unavailable man that doesn't, give you emotionally what you want, doesn't commit, whatever. And that is a wound that's signaling to build self-esteem, for example. I don't have like examples for everything. This is sort of your own journey to figure stuff out. But that's what I do find with these people is, sorry, let me just put my fatty down. That's what I do find with these type of relationships is like, it's like this meeting of the souls, and they have things that you like that are like off the charts. With the psychotherapist, it was really fun things in common, interested in plant medicine, intellectual, funny, a gentleman, sophisticated, put together. I could go on and on and on. Things that I deeply, deeply want in somebody else. But then he had the things that trigger me more deeply than anybody else. Avoidant, emotionally unavailable, non-communicative. Switching to the psychological perspective, that is what feels like home for me. So when we're younger, we're born into this family. That's how we learn love. We need to attach to human beings for our actual survival. Babies do die if they are not, held and taken care of. So that's our attachment style. That's what we learn. For example, if you grow up in a home that's abusive, that there's neglect, whatever, you meet a man who's emotionally unavailable, that's just like a honing device. Like that is like, that's home for you. That's your definition of love, because your definition of love has gotten some good stuff entangled with some bad stuff. That's not the capital, L definition of love. That's your own personal definition of love. And you meet these people that there's enough of a draw, and then there's that shadow side, and that is what showing you where you need to work on things. I find this is where it's hard, because this is where you want to run to something that's comforting, or you want to move on and meet somebody else to solve the problem or whatever. But this is where you got to like do the work. Your nervous system can't handle more input. So sometimes it is a time to retreat and go into the contemplative realm and do this work on yourself. Also, the urge can be like, oh, I just like wish I was with that person. But the work is in dissolving that energy until you can see that you don't want to. You can see how it's a garbage fit with that person, and it would have been a lifelong of misery where they're not meeting your needs and they're triggering you. So psychologically, we experience trauma. Again, that abusive household. You think love is synonymous with, neglect and abuse. And then you meet somebody. This is just you go on your day-to-day life, you go grocery shopping, you hang out with friends, you're like functioning, and then you meet this person and get triggered. So that trauma, I think we're all reading The Body Keeps Score these days. I think it's really cool how trauma is so in style right now, because it's answering all my questions anyway. So you have this trauma floating around in your body, in your mind. You meet this person, there's got to be a fun connection, and then the trauma comes up. When you start to feel triggered with somebody, oh, I still have trauma that is surfacing, and that's what you need to look at. So, we kind of have the soul realm where it's a little more metaphorical. Like, let's look at the pieces of yourself you've abandoned, rejected, lost. I'm going to just quickly add a note about shamanic soul retrieval process. Good sources on this. There's a YouTuber I watch, Christina Lopes. She, the Heart Alchemist. She does have a really good meditation on soul retrieval. I think it's the sovereignty activation meditation. I'll look it up and put it in the comments. And book, The Way of the Shaman. There's another author, Stephen Farmer. There's a lot of stuff on shamanism and soul retrieval. And it's fascinating because according to that way of thinking, when you experience a trauma, in order to self-preserve, some of your soul actually ejects. So it allows you to deal with the trauma and move on with your life. But then we have all these little pieces of our soul we've left behind. Some people think that we've actually left them behind in other lifetimes and stuff like that. So all of these things are, whether it's psychology, whether it's spirituality, they're all pointing to needing to reintegrate, needing to feel whole again. So whether you're drawn to shamanic soul retrieval, whether you're drawn to looking at trauma work and how to release trauma from the body, a little bit of contemplative work and see what it is that you've lost, rejected, etc. That's another way. There's so many ways to process the pain, and even though it's hard, I do look at meeting these kind of people as a gift, because it's really a cool spotlight on the pain that's still there that needs to be worked on. And as you work on this, you do get a sense of what is a healthy relationship, to see where you have betrayed yourself. So anytime you're in this relationship that's not working, it's actually triggering you, it's actually bringing up trauma, it's actually painful, you're colluding in your own abandonment, which is not helpful, because we want to be in this process of integrating you know, all these things so that we're fully healthy and fully present. So this is also, it's an opportunity, yes, to see your pain and your wounds and heal that, to see what your needs are and have some confidence and conviction around that. Knowing your needs sounds simple, but the older I get, the more I realize it's not. You do tend to grow up in a world that, you know, you're programmed a certain way, whatever way that is, whether it's societal values, or I just finished reading a book about this woman that was in like a cult. That's some serious programming. So we can become strangers to ourselves. We can abandon our own selves. And I find that modern dating culture, there's shame surrounding certain needs. People are very into right now, like, don't expect anything. Like, you should just sexually give yourself away and have no expectations and being casual and all that stuff. But that's not who I am. That's not serving my needs. If I don't listen to that, I am abandoning myself and I'm lowering my chances of finding a healthy relationship. This is where it gets so hard, because there can be, you know, long stretches of loneliness. And I know I look at the world and I'm like, it feels like everything is on the menu except for what I need. I feel like, you know, so many men treat you like pornography pieces or prostitutes. Like, it's gotten very strange. So, you know, for me to come back to what my actual needs are sometimes feels like a fantasy unicorn place. But I've also gotten to the point in my journey where it's like, I cannot abandon myself anymore. It's not working. I am who I am. I have the needs I have, and those needs are an indicator for who's going to match with me. So a lot of work on figuring out what your needs are, and like, oh my gosh, everybody stop feeling shame and guilt and apologizing and trying to squeeze yourself into something that's not fitting. It's just it's so crazy how much we abandon ourselves to try to make some garbage fit. And I'm talking like, especially if we have CPSD. Whew. So that was a bit of a ramble. Another psychological practice that's really good on healing these things is shadow integration work. I watched a video, again, by Christina Lopes. Kegley has one. Doughty has one. I just checked out a book from the library on shadow work. So shadow work is pretty standard in psychology. Carl Jung is the one who came up with that. It's kind of getting popular again. So shadow work is looking at the parts of yourself that you don't like. Shadow parts are parts you've disowned, so you have to integrate them back, and that's when you start to see some pretty cool things happening. I know as I do shadow work, as I do all these different kinds of practices, I am noticing such a calmness, such an inner strength. Enticing just to keep going with that. So I think that covers the soul and the psyche. We have looking at what you've abandoned in yourself, what you've rejected about yourself. Do some shadow work, do some shamanic soul retrieval. Look at the mystery of why this person's triggering you. Look at trauma work. And now I want to move into the body. Body keeps the score. I'm going to do further videos. Again, this is just my classic ramble video. That's an introduction, but I think I'm going to, as I go further into this work, I'll do something on shadow work, on something on trauma. But just as a quick intro, your body is storing trauma. I know for myself, like going through anxiety and depression, like my nervous system is just like hardwired sometimes that I'm like, am I excited about somebody, or are they just bringing up triggers? Like, is this just a stressful situation, or is it exciting? And we got to pay attention to our body. So yes, our heart, our soul is important. Our psyche is very important. But if we're going to make this a totally holistic practice, there is so much your body is saying. And the last year, I've made a real commitment to make my body my best friend, and this amazing system that also gives you signals. And once you start really developing that relationship with your body, you really start to notice the signals of, like danger, warning, like shut that down, that person's horrible. And again, get into trauma work, get into CPSD if you're interested in this, because the wiring's a tiny bit faulty and you can't always trust your intuition. Like there's parts of that body and nervous system that need to be healed before you can clear a picture of where you're supposed to go. So lots of work to do. Yeah, so people trigger you, you're releasing these stress hormones. Definitely something to look at. And another thing that's like cropping up a lot is being in your own sovereignty. This is something that I've explored through meditation, through yoga, comes up a lot. Aaron Doughty calls it his frame. So he talks about, I get more popular with YouTube, he would see that, you know, people were kind of like glomming onto those, you know, maybe this person can do something for me. So he was looking at people as, what significance do you get by being in my frame? And I like that word frame. I've always used like sovereignty or my own energetic system. Being in your own frame, in your own sovereignty, is extremely important. So I have noticed also doing all that grounding work and energy work with the Jeffrey Allen courses, that's when I really realized I am not in my body. I'm not in my own energetic system. And everything kind of melts together when you're not. I find I used to, when I was not in my body, I was so much more impressionable. I took things so much more personally. I would get offended much more at their way of thinking or whatever. It's like nonstop charges. But I do find now that I'm much more in my energetic system by doing a lot of meditation and yoga, I'm much more self-contained. I'm able to listen to my own thoughts and needs. I'm able to connect to the divine much more. I go on and on and on. So when Aaron Doughty talks about being in your own frame, I 100% agree with that. Because yeah, you need to minimum stop those stress hormones from pumping out just by living your daily life and interacting with the world. You're just so much more protected when you're in your own frame, your own sovereignty, whatever you want to call it. Because when you're stressed too, you go to like your lowest thoughts and emotions. And I think I lived most of my life with those thoughts and emotions thinking they were real. Is a lot in this world that if you are in your sort of like lower thoughts, that's going to collude with that. So now that I'm stepping out of that, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's like an entirely different way to look at reality. I feel much more like I belong to this lifetime and maybe I have a purpose and am more open up to divine guidance and love and my heart and all that. So when you're in that like stressed out, triggered, lower thinking, don't think that that's like reality, capital R. That is, again, showing you kind of what needs to be healed, because you don't want to attract from that vantage point. You don't want to have a void in you and be attracting from that. You want to be this like glowing, beautiful, energetic system of you and your divine connection and your grounding and all that. So paying attention to the way you feel is a great step. I've talked to a lot of people throughout my life that think crying is wrong or feeling your feelings are wrong. And I know too, with a lot of like law of attraction stuff, people are afraid to feel anything negative. But again, those are little signals your body is telling you to pay attention to and to dissolve. We wanted to get to this higher form of ourselves where we can start discerning, start trusting ourselves, start following our intuition. Yeah. So the other part about the body too is actually moving the body helps a lot. So I do yoga because yoga is, I mean, I do yoga for a million reasons, but yoga is a really, really great tool to release trauma from your body. It's incredible. And total overshare, but I find myself crying when I'm on my mat, and now I just like, I let it release because something needs to be released. I will be crying and have like, nothing will even come to mind of why I'm crying, but it's releasing. My body needs to release. I have that relationship with my body now where I'm like, I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to feel shame for feeling emotions. I am going to work with my body to see what needs to be released. And I do find the effects physically are really nice. Like a lot of the digestion issues that I've suffered from for years are really like, I'm talking, it's like 80% improved. And with yoga comes certain types of breathing that really help release trauma, in particular the Kundalini fire breathing, the one where you're like, it's like blowing out candles. That is also a phenomenal trauma release. There is a lot of, like, if yoga is not your thing, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that talk about different ways to release trauma. Vagus nerve is like something you can throw in your search because that tends to be something that trauma release focuses on. There's a lot of different ways, even just like stamping your feet, screaming, like whatever. There's all kinds of methodologies of releasing this trauma that's been stored, this energy that's been stored in your body that needs to be released. Well, my conclusion is that this work, I hope it doesn't sound daunting. I just presented many options because I think we all resonate with different things, and it's just important to take a practice and really commit to that. For me, it was yoga and shadow work and the Jeffrey Allen meditations. So those are like 3 things that I'm super, super focused on. There's other things out there that are cool, but I think it's just like get started and focus on some kind of modality, and you'll see the changes in the positive side. And then, okay, so as you're healing these parts of yourself, the lure goes away for these people that are so electrically charged, so magnetic. The lure goes away because you're in your own magnet. The goal is to be my own magnet and attract the things that are good for me, good for the world, whatever, and not be hemorrhaging energy to something that is not good for me. So it's not the person that's the end goal, it's the healing of the wounds. You will see the lure goes away, your needs are and what your boundaries are, and there's not, only good can come from that. There's this author, Kathryn Alice. If you need somebody who's like super, super hopeful and cozy about love, read her stuff. But she talks about the voice of attraction and how it inaccurately tells you that, you know, somebody that you have this charge with is your soulmate. So it is a voice that's very important to distinguish from what is actually good and true for you. And she says that when you meet these kind of people that you have that charge with and the voice of attraction is going crazy, that is usually somebody that's going to help us open to a higher and healthier relationship. I do believe, I'm not going to, you know, tack an end goal on anything, but what I'm also learning is like when you're cleaning out their body, when you're cleaning out your soul, your psyche, you do start to think differently. You start to have new patterns in your life, a new self, and then you can just see newer options and move forward in the correct direction rather than being mired in the mud with bad decisions because you're traumatized. I will say, I do think there is something kind of mystical to this encounter. So, I mean, my ego wants to just tear somebody a strip when they cause so much pain, when they kind of, it presents itself as a fantastic opportunity and turns to be a really painful thing. Because you know, the endings for these sorts of relationships with me have never been good. But I am thankful. I do feel like there's something crazy like that happens a soul to soul level. I know Tracee Dunblazier talks about this, where it's like a weird soul connection. Do you think there is something like your psyches are talking to each other, your subconscious is talking to each other, your souls are talking, something beyond what I can explain happens? Because even though my experience with the psychotherapist was like one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had, so much healed in me too, which is making me curious about how healing works. I know when I was doing reflexology certification, they talked about how the most horrible people in the world, if they know how to connect to the divine and send that healing energy, they can do that. So it's always stuck in my mind. We think healers are these like perfect angelic beings, but that seems judgmental to me now, because I've experienced healing from people that I don't get along with at all, or it's just like a bad experience. But ever since I had that experience with the psychotherapist, and I can't explain it, I have felt less needy. I've felt less insecure. I've felt less negative. I have felt more comfortable allowing life to unfold. I have been more clear about my boundaries. I've found it easier to say no to things that don't serve me or not good for me. More able to integrate my disowned parts and love myself. Like it's just really weird how hanging out with somebody only twice can have that effect. So part of me, the ego part of me, is super embarrassed that I became needy, and that whole thing happened. But it's very interesting how energetically I feel completely different, and all these positive things have come in. So that's my little woo-woo moment there to close things off. But yeah, this process, I have to say, any modality that really works, really resonates with you, go for it, because it's really, really cool to see changes in life. I used to kind of externally pray for certain things to come into my life, and now I probably say thank you to the divine source, God, whatever, 100 times a day now. And my prayers are more like, give me the confidence to go through what I need to, you know, give me the strength to be the best I can and make the greatest impact on the world. So I like, my magnet has like flipped polarities. So yeah, my thoughts are just like so completely different than what they used to be. And I would leave you with that. Thank you so much for listening.